What does it mean to sleep? And by the way, why do humans even need it? Can we start right at the top?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So, sleep is not just a cure for sleepiness. It's not just what you do at the end of the day. And sleep is not a passive process because most people think that sleep is just this time when we rest and nothing is happening. The most incredible thing is happening. And so as you're going through different stages of sleep, you are getting synaptic connections strengthened. You're getting what we call restoration, rejuvenation, especially with deep sleep, hormone regulation, all of which can impact our daytime function and our physiologic processes. And then even in terms of heart rest, so your heart rate actually rests and systems get sort of regulated. And so it is so important. And another thing I would say is our mental health. So cognitive processes, emotion regulation, all those things occur during sleep. And right away, you will see some of these changes, memory consolidation, and you will start to see those deficits within even a day of not sleeping
So
well.
pushing the big red reset button, but not because we just want to go from tired to not tired,
Yes.
but because, as you put it, all these physiological processes, the whole resetting of our endocrinology, our hormones, our mental acuity, our sharpness, our focus, concentration,
Immune system.
our immune system, as you were describing earlier on, is
yeah.
all at play. You know what this reminds me of? This concept of, our children, we have legal limits to drinking alcohol, and that doesn't start until 21. You're at least not supposed to. They feel it's different in Europe. But nonetheless, it reminds me of this concept that being awake for 17 hours or more is the equivalent to having a blood alcohol level of 0.05%. I mean, that's nearing up on the legal limit to drive. So we are in serious cognitive dysfunction already at 17 hours awake. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, mom makes it through pregnancy. She figured out how to sleep, relax, take a bath, go to bed, get a schedule going, which I'm sure is also impacting the baby in utero
Absolutely.
to some degree. So that first year, and in terms of establishing the baby's pattern, what's your advice?
So start routines early. I mean, most people will say, well, the newborn doesn't really have a circadian rhythm, right? They don't have a set circadian rhythm. They don't have the full production of melatonin that helps them to recognize the sleep-wake cycle. But they can actually have external cues that can help them to start to mimic what a circadian rhythm would look like. And again, this is where routines will come into place. So having, even with that newborn period, whether it is doing a massage at bedtime, changing them into their pajamas, and then singing a song, setting them up like that, learning their sleep-wake cues. And this is where many times, especially within the first 3 months or so, you tend to see that children or newborns sleep in bursts. But if you can get them to sleep long stretches, you're setting them up really well. So recognizing what their sleep-wake cues are. Some of them will start to rub their eyes. Some of them will start to look away. All those things will help you to establish when to put them down and how to gradually increase the duration of time they're sleeping. And then another thing would be the environment. You want to make sure the environment is conducive for sleep.
Right.
So ensuring that the room is cool, it is dark, it is noise-free when they're sleeping. And when they're awake, it's okay to take them outside. It's okay to go for walks. It's okay to walk around the house and make a little bit of noise. So they start to recognize this. And as they get older, they will start to learn, these right habits.
Okay.
And then something else I always like to talk about is recognizing developmental stages, right? Most people talk about sleep regressions. I'm not a fan of that term because they're not necessarily regressing. They're going through spurts. They're going through developmental phases, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's a regression. It just manifests in maybe some sleep challenges. So when we reframe like that, it really helps parents feel less frustrated. So I think this is really, really important. And be flexible. Your child will get sick. What's going to happen if we're so rigid about schedules and routines? It doesn't help. It only creates more stress, anxiety, and tension. So that flexibility is also important.
Great. And I'm sure, every human principle, everybody's different, every child, every baby's different. But do you have sort of guidelines in terms of what ideal sleep through that first year would look like in terms of length, duration?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think understanding the number of hours of sleep first. So, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the CDC, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, the National Sleep Foundation, these organizations have set recommended sleep durations for children. And it's a wide range. So your newborn will sleep anywhere from 14 to 17 hours. So within that first 0 to 3. And then from about 4 to 12 months, we're usually talking anywhere from about 12 to 16 hours. And then once they get to that first year of life, 1 to 2, usually they're sleeping anywhere from 11 to 13 hours.
Great.
And then, about 10 to 13 hours once they get to that preschool age. So, and then school age children, usually anywhere from 9 to 11 hours. So I think first recognizing how many hours of sleep is the normal range.
Yep.
And then from there, we know that, again, as that first year, they're sleeping in spurts. So they may have 4 naps during the day, during that first initial period. And then between, month 4 and 12, they may come down to maybe 2 or 3 naps. And then by the time they get to that 15 to 18 month, they're dropping that second nap to have 1 nap. And then by the time they're about 3 to 5 years, so preschool, many times you may start to see kids fight back and actually drop their daytime nap completely. So when you understand that, you know how many hours of sleep the age of the child, depending on the age of the child, you can kind of get a sense of how much sleep they're getting. So the beauty of it is there's some variability, and that allows us parents to create expectations. You might not have a child that's sleeping 17 hours.
Right.
Don't worry. It's 14 to 17.
Right.
And so let that be a cue not to get anxious. But as long as you're within that ballpark, I think is important.
That's a burning question I just had, stimulated from what you just asked and how you just answered it. And is this, are we born into this world as good or bad sleepers? I know what you say in the book, but tell us what you
Oh,
talk about
yeah.
that.
I could get on a soapbox about that. Our sleep patterns do not define us. So these are things I hear. I'm a bad sleeper. My child is a bad sleeper. My mom said she's a bad sleeper. I'm an insomniac. Those are identities we do not want to take. So I usually like the thought of, well, I have a child that maybe has some sleep struggles, right? Or I have some sleep struggles. So when we cease from labeling in that way, it is actually pretty empowering, especially when you want to get a buy-in around intervention. Because if you label yourself as a bad sleeper, automatically when I provide you with a customized plan, you're already resistant because you're like, well, it doesn't work for people like me, and I think that is not fair. That being said, there are genetically short sleepers and they're genetically long sleepers. And then when we talk about sleep itself, we talk about what we call our sleep chronotype, which really speaks to about how much time, when are you more likely to fall asleep? When are you more likely to wake up? So we have some people who are night owls and some people who are early birds, and then many of us are somewhere in the middle. So depending on where you are, depending on where you fall when it comes to your chronotype and your genetic inclination, you might be absolutely normal. But because your community has a different definition, that now makes you define your current situation or your child's situation as abnormal.
Got it.
So are there cues we can discover in our children early on to determine whether they're night owls or, and thereby appease that?
A few things you would say. I mean, usually for most children, they tend to be the way it works just physiologically and with the way melatonin production is released. Most children, right? We're not talking, maybe children with neurodiverse conditions and things like that, which is a little bit of a different entity. Most children tend to be morning larks, meaning that physiologically they naturally go to bed a little bit earlier and then they wake up earlier. Then as they get into more of the, pre-adolescent, adolescent stage, there's a gradual shift and a delay in melatonin production, and they physiologically start to be more like the night owls. And then within somewhere around, the 20s, we sort of come back to shift in the middle. But there are people on both extremes. So it becomes that bell-shaped curve, right? So here are a few things that I use to just empower families around approaching that question. What's your child like when they wake up? What does that look like? How do they feel? Are they tired? Are they irritable? Do they have bags under their eyes? Despite getting sort of that ballpark amount of sleep for their age, what does their day look like? Are they falling asleep on car rides? Are they irritable? Are they really hitting a wall in the evening? So that will help you know, okay, this is not normal. There's something is going on. Versus this child wakes up bushy-eyed and, bright-eyed
on
and
their
all
schedule.
that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so you have to look at all those other parameters to tell. But I think those cues will help you to figure out, is there a problem with sleep quantity? So we've talked a lot about sleep quantity. But is there something wrong with their sleep quality? Do they have disruptions in the sleep quality? Or is there something wrong with the timing? Are we trying to force this child who maybe does not naturally feel sleepy at 6:30? We're trying to get them to bed at 6:30. Maybe naturally they want more of a 7:30 bedtime. So those are things that we need to take into consideration.